This is our first in 3 years. I'm Kevin Ortiz, the chair of the CAC, and our vice chair is Kat Siegel. Before I give the chair's report, I'd like to ask Elijah Saunders, our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then he will read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Member Bars.
Bars present.
Bars present. Member Chen.
Chen present.
Chen present. Member Daniels.
Present.
Daniels present. Member Davidson.
Present.
Davidson present. Member San Levine.
Present.
Levine present. Member Ortega.
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Member Ortiz.
Ortiz present.
Ortiz present. Member Roselle. Roselle absent. And Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel present.
Siegel present. We have quorum there.
Great. And then do you want to give the announcement about public comment?
Indeed, thank you for the reminder. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you'll be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, you will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Clerk Saunders. I would say welcome back, but I think for many of us, this is your first time at the CAC. So it's good to see you again, Jerry. But for everyone else, welcome. Yeah, we're so excited to have you all here. This is our first CAC meeting since April 2020. So we have a new setup in the room to support remote public participation on Zoom, which I will speak to at the end of my remarks. But first, last week, Clerk Saunders shared the executive director's report with us that was presented to the Transportation Authority Board at its March 21st meeting. The report is also available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. The executive director's report included some Vision Zero updates, which I was glad to see, such as the ribbon cutting for the quick build project on Battery and Sampson. This project installed new protected bike lanes, making for a continuous corridor for cyclists between Market and the Embarcadero. And the state awarded a $2 million Highway Safety Improvement Program grant to SFCTA that will leverage Prop K funds to install over 3,000 new and replacement traffic signs, such as the no turn on red, stop, speed limit, and no left right turn signs. The CIC recommended allocating the Prop K funds for this project last month. Staff anticipates agendizing several Vision Zero updates at our April 26th meeting, including the 2022 fatality report and the active communities plan. The Transportation Authority Board will hear these updates on the day before April 25th. In March, the board received a comprehensive update on the Bay Area Express lanes with speakers from the state, regional, and local level. Transportation Authority staff will brief us on that presentation later today until agenda item 10, under agenda item 10. Last announcement before meeting logistics is we have a new CAC member representing District 11 who was appointed by the board in March. Mariko Davidson will join us for her first meeting in April. Would you like to say, would you like to say a few words, Mariko?
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be appointed the District 11 representative. I am a mother and an e-biker and a transportation advocate, and looking forward to collaborating with all of you.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
And now for meeting management, now that we're back in person, CAC members who would like to speak up can indicate by standing your name card on its end so its point is up. I asked CAC members and presenters to wait until I call on you to speak, then speak slowly and clearly so that the audience can hear all discussions. Presenters, please only respond to questions if requested by me. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and community notifications during the meeting. Lastly, please be aware that the microphones in the hearing room are extremely sensitive and they will pick up any side conversations or noise. We ask that you all try to keep noise to a minimum while in the meeting room and to please step outside to the elevator lobby if you must talk or do anything that might be picked up by the microphones. Okay, that's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the report? Great. Do we have any public comment on the report?
Yes, Edward Mason, thank you very much. It's good to see everyone back again. I would request that this committee consider the size of this room and increase the volume of your voice so everyone can hear, because I'm back here. So if you could please take that into consideration, that I'd like to be able to participate here. So if you could increase the level of your comments, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, I will increase my voice going forward, and maybe we'll have to get microphones in the future again. So with that being said, do we have any other public comment on the report? Do we take remote public comment as well? Okay,
You.
great.
I see none. I see no remote public comment.
Great. So that being said, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present on these items, but the CAC member wishes any of these items may be removed and considered separately. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Great. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? And no remote public comment as well.
I see no remote public comment.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 3, the minutes on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. Can we take a roll call vote, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, we can, Chair. On item 3, which is the minutes of the February 22nd meeting, member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Chen.
Chen, aye.
Chen, aye. Member Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Davidson.
Davidson, I.
Davidson, aye. Member Ho.
Oh, aye.
Oh, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Ortiz.
Aye.
Ortiz, aye. And Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The minutes approved.
Now let's move on to item 5. And so this is going to be on the SFMTA fiscal year 23 Vision Zero Quick Build Program, as well as the fiscal year 2022 application-based residential traffic calming, fiscal year 24 and 25 residential traffic calming program. We have some presenters here today, Linda Veray, Transportation Planner for Policy and Programming, as well as Jen Wong from the FFMTA Quick Build Program Manager, and Damon Curtis, Traffic Calming Program Manager.
Hello. Hi all, I'm Linda, Transportation Planner. I'll present on the actions before the CAC tonight, and then we'll bring on Jen Wong, Quick Builds Program Manager at the MTA, and Damon Curtis, the Traffic Calming Program Manager at the MTA, to present an overview of the Vision Zero Quick Build Program and the new structure of the applications-based traffic calming program, including a review of the project delivery and the goals of each program. Great. So I'm going to start with a little background information. So this tax was passed in November 2019, and the measure is a surcharge on commercial ride-hail trips that originate in San Francisco for the portion of the trip within the city. The tax also includes private transit companies and autonomous vehicle rides, and the taxes are 3.25% for single occupant trips, 1.5% discount for EV trips, and 1.5% for shared trips. So back in 2019, annual revenue projections were at 30 million per year, but what we have actually collected from January 2020 to December 2022 is about 40% of that. So the total revenues collected is approximately $33 million. And the first guidelines were approved in October 2020. Due to revenue levels uncertainty, we programmed about 7.5 million to MTA's Vision Zero Quick Build program. And as of February 2023, the board has fully allocated these funds. So for the first update to the program guidelines, which is the item before you, we are keeping consistent with the prior guidelines and taking a conservative approach to programming and allocations. We recommend programming funds anticipated to be collected through fiscal year 23-24 and only allocating funds after they have been collected. Right. And this bar graph here includes the TA's total revenues amounts per fiscal year. The pandemic and remote work trends reduced travel to and then within San Francisco. Therefore, this travel reduction impacted revenues collected over the past 3 years. Fiscal year 22-23 includes amounts through December 2022, and the projected revenue is based on controllers' reports. And fiscal year 23-24 revenue estimate is also based on controllers' reports. So we do use 3% of these revenues for program administration and data analysis. Great, and this slide is the funds available. In total, the TA share revenues for projects collected over these past 3 years since 2020 and projected to be collected through the remainder of fiscal year 23 and all of fiscal year 24 totals 28.7 million. We've allocated 7.5 million of that. So with this first update to the guidelines, we recommend programming 21.2 million in additional revenues that we expect to have received by June 30, 2024. Of the total funds available for programming, the TA has received about 8.1 million as of December 2022. So for the priorities for the funds available, we have consulted with the MTA about their funding needs to help meet the Vision Zero goals, and we propose programming revenues from this fiscal year and the next fiscal year to the Vision Zero Quick Build program and the application-based residential traffic calming program, both the current program and the new rolling program, which Damon Curtis will go over. And Jen Wong's presentation for Quick Builds will also address Chair Ortiz's concerns expressed at a recent committee meeting about the pace of delivery of the program. Therefore, I won't go into detail here on those both programs. Okay, and this is our proposed programming. The first project you see fully funds the Quick Build project that the board approved in February 2023. And the second one would provide nearly double the amount of annual funding to the Quick Build program from fiscal year 23-24. It would also fund the construction phase for the application-based traffic calming program for the applications batch received between July 1st, 2020 and June 30, 2021, which was a record number. And it would also fund the new rolling application-based program, which we are very excited to see off the ground. So with that, I'm going to move to Jen Wong's presentation on the Vision Zero Quick Build program, and I'll be just navigating this for her and then also for Damon, and after we'll do questions. Jen?
Great. Thank you, Linda. Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Wong. I am a transportation planner at San Francisco MTA. And next, please. And I'm here tonight to share more information about the Vision Zero Quick Build program, which is our overall effort to implement street changes using a streamlined project delivery method that's in support of the city's overall Vision Zero commitment. Next, please. So the scope of this program is to make physical traffic safety improvements that are adjustable. They tend to be lower cost and using city staff. Next. And those changes generally fall into these 4 categories. So we have signal timing changes, transit stop changes, parking and loading changes, as well as anything that can be accomplished through paint, signs, and delineators. So these could include protected bikeways and road diets, for example. Next, please. So to date, we've completed close to 30 corridor style projects. Next, please. And we, at any given moment, we have more projects that are also queued up in our construction and design phases as well. Next, please. In our most recent fund request, we are planning to add more locations to that queue. And alongside these corridor projects, we also plan to install core improvements such as daylighting and slower pedestrian walk signals, for example, programmatically throughout the Hindry network. Next, please. All of this work is in direct relation to the 2021 Vision Zero Action Strategy, in which the MTA has committed to applying quick build treatments to the remaining parts of the HIN or the Hindry network that still need work. Next. We estimate that to be about 50 miles remaining, as shown by these little blue lines here. We currently have a consultant study underway to identify what potential scope can still be done at these remaining locations. And we remain confident in fulfilling this commitment. Next, please. We see a number of positive outcomes from this program, including the ability to put an emphasis on design iteration and evaluation, the ability to respond to community requests and construction coordination opportunities, and also the ability to stretch our local funding. Next, please. We've also found positive results for individual projects as well. And results for each of these can be found on our Safe Streets Evaluation Program website. Next, please. So when, as we aggregate results across projects, we get to see bigger trends as well. And that was the focus of our latest annual Safe Streets Evaluation Report. It found that capital projects have strong intended results, but that quick builds work as intended too. Next, please. We believe that installing quick build improvements ahead of capital projects or streetscape projects is an effective way to address immediate safety needs. And Fifth Street is one example that illustrates that. It has similar features at a fraction of the cost when compared to Second Street, which is just nearby. Next, please. In terms of pacing, on average, the program has spent about $260,000 per month over the past 3 years. And that's to support the planning, outreach, design, construction, and evaluation of 30+ corridor projects and numerous spot improvements too. Next, please. And in closing, again, just wanted to reiterate that we find quick build improvements to be an effective way to address traffic safety. And we can install them through various means. So that includes spot improvements through the corridor projects, but also through other programs such as our bicycle program or our Muni Forward or Transit Priority Quick Build program, or even just simply by answering 311s. It's been helpful for efficiently delivering improvements and helping us maximize resources. But I do want to say that it's not a solo effort. It is one of the many tools that we use to improve our streets. And we do intend to continue this work with the knowledge that it fits into a larger comprehensive strategy in our pursuit of Vision Zero. And I think that concludes all of my slides, but I'm happy to take any questions and dive into any other topics. I know it's a lot of information to cover, but I think I was given maybe 5 minutes for my presentation. So, thank you, everyone.
We're going to move on to Damon, who's going to present on traffic calming. Damon, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Good evening. My name is Damon Curtis. I'm the Traffic Calming Program Manager at SFMTA. And I'm here to give you an overview of our new plan to improve the application-based traffic calming program. I'll start with a brief history. I'll go into the reasons why we think now is the time to revamp the program, and then give you some details about what those changes are and how they'll improve the program going forward. So next slide. First, just the history of the program. Back in 2000, traffic calming guidelines were initially developed and the program was established. The first decade or so of the program was focused on area-wide projects. That's 2001 to 2012, roughly. The area-wide approach involved a comprehensive, very long, multi-year planning efforts, and we looked at entire neighborhoods and identified traffic calming needs. The end result was a formal report with potential near and long-term improvements, and that usually took several more years to implement. So back in 2013, the program was revamped to focus on block-specific projects. The intent there was to address some of the shortcomings of the area-wide approach and focus more on evaluating applications and delivering improvements on a block-by-block basis. The goal was to speed up delivery, but that hasn't been fully realized due to some inherent process constraints that I'll expand on in a bit. So now that brings us to 2023, where we are now. And the intent of this latest restructuring of the program is to again use lessons learned from the last 20 plus years to create a more efficient and project delivery focused program once and for all. Next slide. So what's driving the change? Why are we doing it now? I think first and foremost, traffic calming is growing. The number of applications we receive has increased significantly in the last few years. Particularly, you can see there for fiscal year 2021, which coincides with the application period that occurred during the pandemic or during the initial shelter-in-place order. More than half of the applications we received that cycle, half of those 221, came in during the last quarter of that application period, and that was April through June of 2020. Those pandemic-related trends continued for the following year, where we had 341 applications received. And that, of course, corresponds with the July 2021 through July 2020 through June 2021 application period. So we did see that number return to pre-pandemic levels last year, but we've got every reason to believe that number is sort of artificially low, because we spent the latter part of the last application period really priming our would-be applicants, prepping them, letting them know that this new program structure was in the works and it was coming. So a lot of them chose to wait until the new structure is in place, the new program is in place this July before they apply. I think conservatively, we're expecting to receive between 100 and 150 applications each year going forward. Next slide. So more applications equals more devices installed, right? So this graph just shows that we've been installing more and more devices each year, and that trend just continues to go up. This year, 2023, this calendar year, we're projecting to install about 300 devices throughout the city. Next slide. So the increase hasn't been limited to the application-based program. There's been a comparable increase in the number of proactive traffic calming projects over the last few years. And these include direct requests by elected officials, emergency responses to specific incidents, and requests associated with separate projects and or programs. And those include the Quick Build program, our Slow Streets program, Vision Zero, as well as our schools engineering program. These other projects and programs account for 25 to 40% of all the traffic calming devices we install each year. And this is important because all traffic calming projects, regardless of their source, compete for the same finite resources to plan, design, and ultimately implement. And we don't see these other projects and programs, there's no signs of that slowing down. So it makes it even more important that we make the application-based program as streamlined and efficient as possible. Next slide. So what do the changes look like? First, it's important to note that the number one complaint we hear from residents is that the process just takes too long. And we tend to agree, but the primary contributors to that timeline, some of them are really our own inherent processes. So, for example, we put ourselves behind from the beginning by having a 12-month-long application period. Secondly, we add extra time because we need to manage separate fund requests for each project phase. So looking at this timeline of the existing program, assuming a cycle that begins this July 1, we start with a 12-month application period. We then have a 12-month planning phase, followed by a 12-month design phase, and ultimately an 18-month construction phase. Total time from application to implementation is 3 to 4.5 years. Slide. So under the new program, you compare that to compare what you just saw on the previous slide to the new program. And now what we're proposing is a separate application period no longer existing. We remove that. We consolidate funding for all the phases, and the evaluations occur on a rolling quarterly basis. So again, assuming a cycle that begins this July 1, that first quarter would be the planning phase. As applications come in, they'll be evaluated to determine which meet or do not meet our criteria for acceptance, and notifications will be sent to applicants. In quarter 2, those accepted applications will be designed and legislated, and then in quarters 3 and 4, those approved measures will be installed. The total time from application to implementation is reduced to 9 to 12 months, and that's from 3 to 4.5 years down to 9 to 12 months. So a significant improvement. Next slide. So here's just a graphical depiction. I don't want you to get lost in the details here, but I included this slide just, primarily to show that we do have a plan to manage the overlapping and recurring phases of the new program. Again, it's going to be happening on a rolling basis quarterly, as well as a plan to integrate outstanding phases from previous program cycles and deliver them concurrently with the rollout of this new program structure. So this graphic shows the planning phases in orange, design phases in green, construction phases in blue, with those concurrent previous program phases near the bottom in the pinkish hue. And realize that ultimately these changes are ambitious, but we do believe they're necessary, and we're confident that they're achievable. So with that, next slide, I can take questions. But actually, before I take questions, I did have one in advance that was from Vice Chair Siegel. She asked if we expected a wave of applications come July when the new program begins, and will that impact the program? I think the simple answer is yes. We do expect a windfall of applications this July, and again, that's because we began telling potential applicants middle of last year that this new program was coming. So a lot of people held on to their applications or are holding on to their applications. So that's created this pent-up demand. It's conceivable that we could receive close to a full year's worth of applications, 100 to 150 within the first quarter. But it's impossible to predict. We'll have to wait and see what actually occurs come July. And but what I can tell you is that we're doing everything we can right now to prepare for a potential wave. We've got staffing in place. We're more importantly completing as much of the pending work as possible right now, so that we can devote our maximum bandwidth to the new program come July. That's it.
Great. I'm going to open it up to questions from members. So if you have a question, please raise your stack card or your name card. Vice Chair Ortega and then Member Bars.
Okay.
Oh, no, Vice Chair, I'm sorry.
No,
Member Ortega. Sorry, Sue.
I really would like to go back to Ms. Wong's presentation. If we could do that for a minute, just that will be the pertaining original question. So something that we were talking about are these high impact network areas. And I just wanted to bring up a comment for you guys in consideration. Recently, I was driving on to visit Darrow, and I noticed that we had been implemented the new 20-mile-per-hour slow, safe speed for pedestrians. However, I would actually like the body to start looking at the implications of that, because I noticed more aggressive driving of cars trying to speed past the lights and try to game the light system. In addition, this caused major issues where they were affecting then the 24 bus, like cutting it off, blocking it, not allowing passengers to get on. And so while I think that the members here all support these measures, I do hope that we are actually taking a look at the other traffic patterns, because as we know, ridership is still down, and delays, for instance, by the bus, less people are going to use the bus, more people are going to drive. And I'm worried we're going to continue to see more aggressive driver behaviors going forward. So I guess that's my only concern, and I would like to see some follow-ups in regards to, you've implemented these changes and you're saying you've seen these results, but I've also been seeing differences. So I would appreciate sort of just more of an overview of what those studies are, because I've been seeing the opposite of that during my city travels. Thank you, Chair Ortiz.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I will certainly note that for our Safe Streets evaluation team. I believe that the 20 miles per hour speed limits are a relatively new effort. And it's good to know that there could be some unintended consequences. Thank you.
Great. Member Bars?
Thanks, Jackie. So I also have a question about the quick build program. So I think I understood correctly that there are 50 miles remaining of the high injury network that require changes. And we have about 21 months before the 2024 calendar year is up. So I'm just curious, I think I heard you say that you were confident that you'd be able to get some quick builds in place. But I would like to better understand how are we going to hit the remaining 50 miles in 21 months?
Yes, thank you for your question. So I think one approach that we're currently undertaking is to use the results of the consultant study that we currently have ongoing, and to basically what we really want to find out is where are, say, the 80 remaining intersections that still remain, that we still need to upgrade our continental crosswalks, for example. I think that's sort of the level of results that we're expecting from the study. And using that, we will program that work to city crews to help implement. So I think that is one approach that we would like to pursue. I think that not every one of those blue line streets will necessarily be an entire street reconfiguration, but I think we need to do our due diligence and install our very core treatments. So these are the treatments including daylighting, continental crosswalk upgrades, retiming our signals for a walk speed that is more comfortable for people crossing the street at a lower speed, and lowering speed limits where we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Sarah, Ms. Bars, in response to your question, also, I wanted to highlight that the study that is being done by a consultant right now, we're expecting the results within the next couple of months. And certainly before we allocate additional quick build funds, that there could be a presentation to the CAC on the outcomes of that study. And so we're anticipating that the next allocation would be in the fall. And we're very interested in what it will take and what the results are of that study. And also there is the active communities plan also is supposed to have results next spring. And there may be quick builds that either have already been addressed in some manner, but some additional recommendations for some quick build type improvements that are easy to implement, if you will, at low costs that come out of that plan as well. So, but anyhow, just wanted to highlight those two efforts. Okay, thank you.
Great. Vice Chair Siegel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have one question for Jen and one question for Damon. Thank you both so much for your presentations.
Chair, so you speak loudly, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one question for Jen and one question for Damon. Thank you for your presentations. For Jen, with regard to the quick build program, my understanding is that that's a relatively new program, but I would love to know, in the lifetime of the program so far, has it been common for projects to be iterated on? Is that something that's happened a lot? Do we have a lot of examples of actually going back and modifying the quick builds later, improving or changing them?
Yeah, certainly. I think one example that I would point to is the continual changes on the 7th Street and 8th Street corridors in Soma. I think that the very first application of treatments on that corridor was we installed a protected bikeway, one in each direction. And in that design, it had a feature of that bikeway contained some mixing zones in which right turning vehicles or drivers needed to get to the right turn lane, while cyclists who are traveling through needed to move to the left of those right turning vehicles. I think that was we collected a lot of feedback on that and found that it was not a preferred sort of interaction that cyclists enjoyed, or drivers. And we came back later on both of those corridors to improve it so that cyclists would be able to stay curbside and use separated bicycle facing in order to separate out those two movements. And I think we've been able to collect some more evaluation data on that as well, so that we can apply what we've learned through bicycle signals at that location to other locations that could use bicycle signals. Over the pandemic, the 7th Street and 8th Street have also gone through additional changes through our transit team. You may have noticed that it now also has transit only lanes. And so that's kind of also an example of how that work kind of overlaps, or like kind of builds off of its prior stages.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then Damon, with regard to the application-based traffic calming program, I was wondering, do all applications that meet the criteria move forward to the design and implementation phase, or do we have to prioritize projects? And if so, what are the criteria for selecting projects?
Sure. Thank you for the question. To date, we've been lucky enough to have enough funding so that every application that we evaluate and determine it meets our criteria, we've been able to move that application forward and ultimately result in, improvement measures on the ground. There's a possibility that at some point in the future, the volume will get too great. The volume will exceed our capacity, both from a staffing standpoint to handle and from a funding standpoint to fund. And at that point, we would have to implement some sort of prioritization scheme, or tighten up the criteria to, as far as what constitutes acceptance. One or the other, or a combination of the both, would probably happen. But again, to date, we haven't had to do any of those things, luckily.
Thank you so much.
Great. I'm gonna call it myself, and then I saw yours go up. But so really quickly, I had a question for Damon, and then also a question for Jen. So really quickly, for Damon first, I think particularly, I guess I'm curious to know, in the event that you do receive 150 traffic calming applications, and I've submitted one of them myself, right? For my blocks particularly, so a little familiar with the process. But in the event that like you do receive like a major wave, like what is the plan of action to making sure that there is staffing capacity or prioritization capacity to make sure that these projects are done in a timely fashion, including potentially like looking at potentially allocating more resources staffing wise to be able to handle the wave. I guess I'm just curious in the event that that does happen.
Thank you for that question. So, if we get an influx of 100, 150 applications in, July and August and September, then, well, number one, we've got the infrastructure in place in terms of our data collection consultant. We will be able to collect data and at least complete the planning phase for all of those projects on schedule, right? So that's the first step. And as far as staffing is concerned, we may have to make some determinations about, phasing in, creating sort of a sub phase within that initial quarter in order to handle them all. I mean, there's just so many, we only have so much staff and they only have so much capacity. Especially when it comes to design and legislation. We can't, put, 50 traffic calming projects on a public hearing agenda, for example. So we may run into constraints in that arena, but that would just put us behind, a matter of weeks, at the most, a month or two, as opposed to some long drawn out delay. And I mean, I think the only time that I would be concerned is if we had 2-3 quarters in a row with 150 applications, then we'd have to put we'd have to say time out and figure out a new approach. But I don't see that happening. I mean, there's no indication based on past practices that we would expect to get that many applications at any given time. Even the busiest years, I mean, those were applications received over the course of an entire 12-month period, right? It wasn't, in a 3-month period like we're proposing to structure the program going forward.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just a follow-up question to that, like what is the realistic, I guess, capacity for staff in an ideal world to be able to handle the maximum amount of applications without overloading staff capacity?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer, honestly, because, we make our staffing decisions based on priority and based on workload, right? So if we've got to devote a little more staff time to traffic calming for a period of time, then we will do that, right? To the extent that we can. It's impossible for me to I can't put a number on, we can only handle X number of traffic calming applications in a given year. It's just, everything else is just too variable.
Yeah, I just wonder if like maybe having a cap for like applications being received, et cetera, right? Might be just a better approach, right? And then at that point, once the amount of applications have been received, having a cap on it, and then, telling those folks to reapply for the application, maybe it becomes a pretty competitive process, right? Where, the first of the quarter, people are submitting applications, but then it's locked in at that time and you have to wait till the next time around. And if it's, if data is collected over 6 months to a year about that this program is so highly competitive, right? It could be used as a way of demonstrating the need for having additional resources for staffing capacity coming in, if the influx of applications, just maybe a thought or suggestion on it.
No, those are all very good points. And, again, I'd reiterate that, luckily to date, we haven't had to, get that far into the weeds and start to sort of constrain the program in that way. We've been able to handle the capacity that we've been given based on, public demand thus far. But, the points that you made in terms of how we prioritize, putting caps on the number of applications per quarter, things of that nature, those are all possibilities and things that we would certainly look at if and when we come to a point where we have reached our limit, right? Again, I don't foresee that happening, but you never can tell. And again, these are things that we have been thinking about and contingencies that we've discussed. And it just, again, we're lucky enough we haven't had to roll any of them out today.
Great, thank you. And then I had a question for Jen, particularly on the quick build program. And I'm looking at oh, sorry, yeah, can you hear me? So I had a question for Jen on the quick build program. So particularly, I guess, I did bring up some concerns at the last meeting just on just the implementation of the quick build program, and thank you for kind of answering some of these initial questions right away. I think for me, particularly in the sense of, I do kind of echo Member Bars's concern about finishing up the 50 miles remaining within the next 21 months. And then also about, particularly how you all are going to prioritize projects, particularly within communities of concern, given that if projects are not going to be completed within those 21 months, how are you going to be able to gauge which projects are going to be prioritized, and also taking into account neighborhood equity, so to speak. So I guess I'd just like to hear a little bit on that, as well as additionally, just metrics on things like, I guess I'll just put that question first, and I had a follow-up.
Yeah, we can begin by talking about sort of how projects are prioritized and the way projects are phased in. I think there are lots of considerations that could be balanced. So for example, we do have some ongoing relationships with community groups and community leaders who clue us in on sort of the appetite or desire for improvements on certain streets of their neighborhood. I think that is one way we can sort of queue up projects as one finishes. I think that's been one way we've been implementing improvements on Tenderloin streets, for example. I think there is an ongoing relationship there where we can really look towards community leaders to help us decide what will be the next street. And as you know, every street in the Tenderloin is on the Hindry network, and so something must be done. I think another way where we could prioritize projects, really kind of meeting the moment, kind of like what Damon said earlier, like why now and why here, is looking at other studies or other efforts that are reaching their final recommendations. So for example, when we were working on some corridors in the Bayview, those were directly taken from the completed and adopted Bayview community-based transportation plan. And so we really wanted to not let there be too much of a gap in terms of the formation of that community-based transportation plan and the actual physical implementation. So that's another consideration that we would make. I will say that there is a balance with quick build projects. I think on the one hand, we do want to implement quickly and get something on the ground and let folks experience the new changes for themselves. But on the other hand, we have also received feedback that like quick builds might be moving too quick, and doing to be honest, doing quality outreach does take additional time too. So there is sort of that balancing act.
Yeah, no, I think well, I look at Valencia, for example, right, a 5-year project on the line, right? There's been a lot of community engagement and a lot of different players that coming out of the woodwork, it seems, every week. I guess for me, and just kind of like talking about a specific quarter, and I appreciate like you bringing up the fact that community leaders and folks are engaged, and that's one way to plugging in, and maybe also having it kind of scaffolded in from a community-based transportation plan. I guess, for me, since I've been kind of dipping my toes a little bit into Valencia, in the terms of, I know we had brought up in community about, having some traffic studies included with that quick build program particularly. How do you all, I guess, measure the need for a traffic study on the SFMTA side coming from the department particularly? So that way, like, there's something like a traffic study needed, right? Or circulation studies, right? Or, as well as like some of the other metrics that might not necessarily come in built in with a quick build project.
Yeah, in my own opinion, I think that'd be really cool. And that would certainly help me a lot to know where the physical implementation can go. In terms of programming, like a larger traffic study or area-wide sort of study, I'll actually maybe defer that to my director, Jamie Parks.
Hey, Jamie.
Good evening, everyone. Jamie Parks, oversee livable streets at SFMTA, which includes both our quick build and traffic calming program. And thanks for having us this evening. And so Charities, that's a great question about how we kind of balance and identify the need for larger traffic studies when we do specific corridor projects. I will say that I think that a lot of what's in our quick build toolkit and a lot of what we plan to do over the last 50 miles of the high entry network are very basic, life-saving measures that don't have kind of larger traffic circulation impacts. And so when it comes to daylighting continental crosswalks, painted safety zones, retiming our signals, that core quick build toolkit, we feel pretty comfortable. We can roll that out across the high entry network. It makes sense, and it doesn't kind of have kind of these larger cascading impacts. But there have been quick build projects that are more corridor reconfigurations, whether it's something like Valencia or some of the projects in the Tenderloin or Soma. And on those, we have tended to have a longer process where there's both community outreach and also more technical studies. And the evaluation process of those projects itself tends to be much more complicated. And so for the proposed Valencia pilot, for example, we've set aside almost $100,000 just for data collection and evaluation, recognizing that if that proposal were to move forward, it's quite complicated. It could have pretty large cascading impacts across the neighborhood. We want to set aside a very large evaluation program to make sure we're collecting all the metrics and evaluating, all the things that are important to the community.
Great, thank you. And I think I'm just wondering, I guess, in terms of, like moving forward, I guess, how does SFMTA look for some of these specific corridor projects to know, like, I guess, proactively, so that way it's not necessarily necessarily coming from community, right? But being more front loaded from the department.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think for the more complex corridor based quick build projects like Valencia or Folsom or Howard, I think as Jen mentioned, we really do try to take those as much as possible from previous community based planning efforts and organizations. And so whether it's work with the Tenderloin Traffic Safety Task Force or community-based transportation plan, or on Valencia, that it's been a designated bikeway for 25 years and a high focus of a lot of community attention. We try not to generate new corridor projects on our own through the quick build program. Instead, we try to take the need for corridor projects that already exists, and that the quick build program is a tool with which we can satisfy that need. But we're not generally trying to identify brand new complex projects on our own just through the quick build program.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Member Levine.
Thank you for the presentation. I just had a quick question. If I wanted to get some more detail about a particular application, where might I go to get that information?
I assume you're talking about a traffic calming application, correct?
Yes, yes.
Well, you can simply send an email back to, geez, now I'm blanking. Traffic calming apps at sfmta.com. Or you can send me an email directly. It'll get to the person.
Yeah, I'll probably send you an email directly. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem.
Great. Do we have any other questions from members?
I do have one last one. Good evening. This is probably for Damon Curtis. I'm not sure if you answered it, but I'm curious if there are any anticipated negative impacts to consolidating the funding that helped to cut down the process. The new process versus the old process of a lot of how you got to the 9 months, 1 year versus 3 years, 4.5 years, you said was consolidating funding. Can you speak a little bit more about that? And if there are any anticipated impacts from that?
Thank you for the question. I don't foresee any impacts from our side, the project manager side. All of these, the idea of consolidating the funding simply means that we won't be going through, 3 separate allocation request processes, right? Which take time, each one of those. And that creates gaps in our delivery of traffic calming. We've got to, put in an allocation request when we want to start the planning phase, put one in when we want to start design, and et cetera, for construction. So I don't foresee any issues with that. Our reporting is going to continue just like it has, on a quarterly basis. So, the TA will be kept appropriately apprised of our progress. And I think that it's just a win-win all around.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other? Yeah.
If I could make a comment on in response to your comment, not that we're expecting negative impacts, but we are interested in how it rolls out over the next year. It's been something that's been in the works for a while. We have funded the traffic calming program since 2000 and its various iterations. And so we're excited, but also want to see what's happening. So the plan is that one of the actions is to program funds to implement this new program. SFMTA is planning to come back next month to request those funds. We had been talking about breaking that up into multiple allocation requests. I think what we'll end up doing is probably just putting it all into one request so that there is continuity with implementation. However, asking SFMTA to come back after that first year and report out on how it's going.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions for members? Awesome. Do we have any public comment? Mr.
I
Mason?
would request the members of the committee, if you could just speak up a little bit louder, because you're projecting forward. I'm back here, so it has to bounce off this class to come back, so if you could just take that into consideration. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking for public comment. I don't see any public comment. And also a reminder to anybody on Zoom, if you wish to speak, just use the raise hand feature or dial *9. And then when you're called upon, you can unmute yourself or dial *6 in order to get the full Zoom experience. Just a friendly reminder. Thank you.
Call for a motion.
Great. So do we have a motion to approve this item?
And Bars move.
Great. Do we have a second?
Siegel second.
Great. Can we please take a roll call vote?
Yes, we can. So we have a motion from Bars and a second from Siegel on item 5. Member Bars?
Bars aye.
Bars aye. Member Chen?
Chen aye.
Chen aye. Member Daniels?
Daniel, aye.
Daniels aye. Member Davidson?
Davidson aye.
Davidson aye. Member Oh
aye.
Oh aye. Member Levine? Levine aye. Levine aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega aye. Chair Ortiz?
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz aye. Vice Chair Siegel?
Siegel aye.
Siegel aye. We have 10 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great. So let's move on to item number 6. which is adopting a motion of support to allocate 2.4 million in traffic congestion mitigation tax funds to the SFMTA fiscal year 23 Vision Zero Quick Build Program, Part 2.
Yes, hi, everyone, again. So this next presentation is on the TNC tax allocation. This will be very short. This request is to allocate 2.4 million in funds to fully fund the construction phase of this program. So in February 2023, the board allocated 2 million in TNC tax funds and 345,000 in the top K funds for the design phase and a portion of the construction phase. And approval of this request is contingent upon the guidelines, item 5, which recommend programming these funds to this project. So with that, I'm able to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from members?
This slide up.
Seeing none, do we have any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
go ahead, Member Ortega.
I have a really quick question. I think this is great, and I just want to make sure that we go back and with the new funds, we also make sure that we're keeping up the old funds, old areas. And I'm just adding that as a note because like I bike on Valencia Street and the paint is like really making it impossible to bike now because it's like 3 grades of paint, no paint and cement. So I just want to make sure that's drawn to attention as we move forward with everything, that the maintenance for the old stuff is being brought back. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions from members? Seeing none, do we have public comment? Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment. There is no public comment for item 6.
Do we have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Great, and then second,
Second.
can we do a roll call vote?
And we have a motion from Siegel and a second from Ortega. Chair, if you have no objections, we can take the same house, same call.
Great.
All right, same house, same call. The motion is approved.
Awesome. Let's go on to item number 7, which is adopting a motion of support to authorize the executive director to enter in a funding agreement with the MTC for a total amount not to exceed 270,000 for San Francisco travel diary survey data collection. Presenting will be Drew Cooper from Senior Transportation Monitor from the SFCTA.
Cursor is invisible. Okay, great. Excuse me. It's nice to be here with you all in person. This item is for funding agreement with MTC to fund travel diary data collection. What is travel diary data collection? So this is called the Bay Area Travel Survey. This is a data collection effort that is led by MTC with participation by the SFCTA and VTA. MTC is funding this effort at a level of $500,000. They have a kind of regional scope, so they will be collecting data from every county in the 9-county Bay Area, including San Francisco. SFCTA is contributing a total of $270,000 to basically increase the amount of data that we're collecting specifically in San Francisco County. And VTA is similarly funding an additional $100,000 worth of data collection in Santa Clara County. The data itself is for the most part, it's a week-long travel diary survey, which means that participants primarily will download an app on their phone, and with their permission, it will track their movements over the course of a week. We pay people to participate. That's the way they do it. And what we get out of that is an entire week's worth of travel data that includes every trip that everybody makes, with an origin and a destination and a travel purpose and a mode. We offer other ways to participate for people that are not comfortable using smartphone technology. People can participate through a web-based survey. And if they're not comfortable with that, we also have a call center assisted survey option where you can call in and talk to a human who will help you fill out the survey. And this contract, this funding agreement is for a first phase of data collection, but this is a 10-year contract with planned data collection every 2 years going forward. The part that the SFCTA is funding is supporting 3 different internal projects. First are a certain set of core duties associated with our role as congestion management agency. So we have sorry, we'll get details in a second. The second is a travel demand market analysis study. And the third is called the Transportation Sustainability Program Evaluation Tool. So the first one, our modeling and forecasting activities, we maintain a travel demand model called CHAMP. We use it to in our forecasting and planning work for project evaluation. We also use the data that we would get from this travel diary data collection to support our congestion management program. The TDM travel market analysis is looking at travel markets within San Francisco to which TDM is well suited. So trying to identify places where TDM here in this case stands for travel demand management, which is a set of non-infrastructure approaches to managing how people travel, like offering bus passes, for example. So this study is looking at places where strategies like that are typically non-infrastructure can be most effective. And then the TSP evaluation tool is part of an effort that we have been participating in for a number of years with other city agencies, the planning department and SFCTA, where we are supporting the travel demand management ordinance, which requires new development in San Francisco to implement TDM programs. And we are using some of this data collection to recruit people who live in buildings with a lot of parking and other buildings with not very much parking in order to estimate the effect of building less parking on reducing driving. So across these 3 projects, again, we're contributing a total of $270,000. All of that data collection is targeted towards residents of San Francisco County and supporting these 3 San Francisco County focused projects. We expect the money that we're contributing to generate about 1,400 to 1,600 complete surveys. And that's in addition to what we'll get from TC's contribution. And this is all happening pretty soon. The first round of data collection is going to be in about 6 weeks in the spring of this year, followed by a second round in fall of this year. So September, October, after school is back in session. And then going forward, again, this data will be collected every 2 years. With that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Great. I'll open up to questions from members. Member Davidson and then Member Hill.
Thanks for the presentation. Can you talk about how in the survey or the data collection piece, you're ensuring you're collecting data from all parts of the San Francisco County and ensuring an equitable approach?
Yes. So we have different ways that the sampling is structured to ensure that we're getting a representative and equitable sample. The first is that we have county level totals. That's pretty basic, just ensuring that we get a minimum number of people from each county that's participating. Within San Francisco, we've structured our own data collection to break down the city into quadrants. So we have minimum targets by quadrant of the city. Again, pretty high level. The next thing that we do is that we have specific targets for equity priority communities and low income communities. And so we send out more invitations to people living in areas that meet those criteria to get higher participation. We're also offering higher levels of incentives for those same groups of people. The third and final group that we oversample in the same way are people in places that disproportionately walk, bike, and take transit.
And is there a pause in the collection to assess if you're getting the right balance? And if not, what is the approach?
Yes, that is why we have a spring and a fall data collection.
Great.
In part. I should also mention that we offer the survey in English, Spanish, and Chinese.
Thank you.
Member Ho.
Actually, piggybacking off your question, what are the incentives that you're offering and how do they scale for low income communities?
That is a good question, and I don't know the specific amount. It's not large dollars. It's on the order of 50 for a household.
And then can you give us a little more information about the outreach plan? So you said that it is a survey, but are you mailing people information about this and then they sign up for it? Are you posting QR codes throughout the city and they scan on their app, or how does it work?
We are mailing people directly at their address. So what's called a random address based sample. And typically the way that it's done is that you send out an initial mailer and then a follow-up, so that you hit people twice.
Thank you.
Member Ortega and then member Mr. Siegel.
Thank you. You answered a lot of my questions. Thanks to Member Davidson and Member Ho. The other thing that I was curious about is, I know that this is for San Francisco only, but are you going to make sure that your survey targets people that have commutes outside of the city as well? Just because I know that a disproportionate number of, say, of my friends, which is not, of course, representative of the city, but a large portion of my friends actually have to leave the city. And I also would like to know if you guys are going to account for the weather on that. Because, for instance, it's been typhooning, I don't bike as much. So will you keep track of weather patterns as well and correlate that into your data?
So I'll take the first one first. The money that we're spending is specifically for San Francisco residents, but the broader survey effort is getting residents of all 9 Bay Area counties, and we will get that data. So we will get trips from people that live in San Francisco that are traveling within the city, that are leaving the city, trips from people that live elsewhere and are traveling in. All of that will be included. With respect to the weather question, that hasn't specifically been an issue in the past, but what we have experienced was in 2018, when we last did this, that coincided with a really terrible fire season. And so what we actually did in that case was went out into the field a third time. So I can't anticipate what kinds of modifications we might need to do, but we try to be flexible to account for real world things that can impact data collection.
I'm just curious if there's a way for you to also store the data of like a correlated of the weather pattern.
Yeah, historical weather data is available, so we could certainly do that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Siegel and then Member Bars.
Thank you for the presentation. I had previously asked a question about capturing trips not taken, and I know that's not within the scope of this study, but I was wondering similarly, does the survey ask people any questions about the mode, that like why they chose a mode and whether they would have preferred a different mode if it had been safer or available? Like would have preferred to take transit, but there's no bus that goes where I'm trying to go, or would have preferred to walk or bike, but it doesn't feel safe, things like that, to an account for that when thinking about the demand.
There are cases when we ask questions about what people would have done if the mode they chose was not available. We don't do that in all cases. One of the ways that this ends up getting used is that we get a full set of data that describes the choices that people actually made. And we use that to estimate predictive models where we kind of change what the transportation networks often are and see how that affects the choices that people are making. That does get a little bit like the what would people do if things were different. That doesn't cover every case that you just listed. Specifically, it doesn't really get to safety questions. It does to some degree, to the extent that like bike lanes and street safety are concerned, but not to the extent that people may feel unsafe on the bus, for example.
Sorry, did you have something? Okay. Member Bars?
Thank you. So I have a question about lifestyle factors and how that's figured into the survey. So I actually participated in a travel survey that was not put on by MTC last year, exactly a year ago. And it followed me for 2 weeks. It was really interesting, highly recommended experience if you guys get invited to do it. And one thing that I noticed is that it didn't ask me about, for instance, the fact that I was on maternity leave at the time, which really, frankly influenced my choices during that 2 week period because I had a 8-week-old child. So I'm curious how you're considering those kinds of things. Like some people have a 100% remote work job that's going to drive a lot of their decision making. Some people are on leave. Are those things being encountered or encountered into the survey in some way?
Some things, some kind of like things are, but not those specifically. So we'll ask people if they are at their primary residence or at a second home, like if they're on vacation, for example. But essentially, like that example showing up in our data is not really a problem. Like, because those are parts of life and they're things that we want to capture. And like, you take a person that fits a certain profile, lives in a specific place, has a job in a certain place, then we want to get whatever they're revealed to be doing at the time that we survey them.
So, okay, so it's like, it doesn't matter for the purposes of the model that like things like you encountered X many people who were on parental leave, which might have changed their choices.
Yeah, it essentially doesn't matter. Not to get too into the weeds, but like we estimate probabilities that somebody's going to do something, and there's like a low probability that we're going to survey somebody that's on maternity leave.
Okay.
And if we do, that's real data.
Okay.
I would also add, Sarah, if you're not maternity leave, somebody else might be, so it is not.
There's a certain amount of the population
will be at any given time.
Yeah, okay.
So it's realistic.
Okay.
I had a really quick question on that. And Thank you, Drew. I think for me, so I know that you all are doing a random mail out in order to reach a variety of different constituents. I'd like to know, particularly in the event that, certain communities don't respond, right, because of lack of trust or just lack of the ability to be able to engage in communities. Like, what is the CTA's plan to be able to make sure that we're reaching those harder to connect with constituencies, through either trusted partners, and also in other languages, right? I know you had mentioned Cantonese, English, Spanish, but also about what about Tagalog, following with our language access ordinance. So I guess I'd like to know just particularly on what is the plan in the event that we're not reaching those constituencies or they're not participating in the travel diary? What is the plan to make sure that we are reaching those groups?
So we don't have a specific plan for what we might change, but we, again, are doing 2 rounds of data collection with the intent of we'll use the first one to identify if we are in fact having shortfalls or lack of participation in particular communities. The random address-based sampling is a pretty important component of the way this type of data collection works, to make sure that you're not introducing sampling biases to the extent that you can avoid doing so. And so we would want to do things like increasing the sampling rate for communities that are not participating at the levels that we are hoping, and potentially increasing the amount of incentives that we're paying those same folks to participate.
And when do you do the second round? And when is the first round completed?
The first round is in spring, so in about 6 weeks. The second round will be in, the date hasn't been determined, but it will be after school is back in session in fall.
Great. Do you think we could get an update on that after the first round on that, just to see how the metrics are with constituencies?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Drew. Do we have any other questions from members? Do we have public comment?
Regarding surveys, my question, a couple of questions. One, how effective has CHAMP been in past applications when they're called upon for studies? That's one question. Uber came out and did a survey because I received it in the mail for their driverless cars. And then Lyft, then Uber, that was Google. That was Google that did that. Then Uber teamed up with the taxi industry through MTA to go on their app. Those were concurrent. And I viewed that as Uber getting free data through the taxi industry. Everybody's collecting data, and it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. At the MTC level, are they considering to photograph the license plates and match those with a zip code? Because all you have to do is listen to KCBS every 10 minutes, and 101 where the Bay Bridge is congested from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night type thing. And I'm always wondering, where are all these people going? Because they're passing through San Francisco. Where are they coming from? Where are they going? Yeah, there's a few that come in here, but in the big picture, I think you've got so much inter-county transportation going on that's congesting everything. That has anyone tried to identify the license plate with a zip code to determine what those travel patterns are? It'll be interesting to see what you get out of this thing. But personally, with the COVID, with weather, all the other elements, I don't know how successful the results of this survey are really going to be. And also to be able to get people's attention to be diligent.
So public comments
in
ceased.
answering those questions.
Thank you. Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking
See.
for remote public comment. And no remote public comment. Thank you.
Great. So do we have a motion to approve this item? Great. Member Ho, do we have a second? Member Ortega, seconds. Can we do this?
And we can take the same house, same call. Same house, same call. The motion is approved.
I like doing that in
Skip some
person.
time.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
what is same house, same call
Um,
mean?
yeah.
People new here.
vote by acclamation. So it's basically, we don't have to do a roll call.
Yeah, for information.
Same call as the last.
Great.
But you can do that in person, but if one of you is remote, we're required to call every single name. So that is why we can do that now. If it's the same people in the room, same vote, we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Great, let's move on to item 8, which is adopting a motion of support to amend the adopted fiscal year 2022-2023 budget to increase revenues by 31 million, decrease expenditures by, sorry,
A big number.
19 million. And decrease other financing sources by 55 million for a total net decrease in fund balance of 856,000. That being said, I'm going to have Cynthia come up and present.
We just need a moment, everyone, to pull up the presentation.
And Cynthia Fong is our Deputy Director for Finance and Administration with the SFCTA.
Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. How's my volume right now? Much, oh, higher, much higher? Maria, okay, no problem. Well, I can start without the presentation. All right. Everyone, good evening. It's budget season right now. This is going to be one of 3 items you'll see in the next few months related to the San Francisco County Transportation Authority's budget. This is the mid-year budget amendment. This is where we take stock as to how we're doing in the year during with revenues, expenditures, and our fund balance, which is equivalent to our retained earnings. I have a presentation here for you because we, as Chair noted, there are some large numbers this year. It's actually a little unusual for it to be a $31.5 million update. But I would love to have the chart up to show you. And for some of you who are maybe newer members, let me start talking about our sales tax revenues, which is our main source of revenue for the Transportation Authority. Thank you, Elijah. Thank you, Clerk. Okay, what I have here before you is a chart, just so you have an understanding. These are just a chart of the revenues we plan to increase. We have much more revenues here at the Transportation Authorities. What you have is in the blue is what the original adopted budget amount was. And then what you have in the gray is what we are proposing for the mid-year budget. Mid-year to us means revenues or information that we collected up to February 2023. Now here, let's see. I'll just give everyone a moment to just absorb that. And I'll jump into details of why we are increasing each one of these items on the chart. On this next slide, as I said, sales tax revenue is our largest source of revenues. That's the half cents we collect in San Francisco. We are increasing that amount by 9.5 million. Now, as we're starting to open up the city, we are seeing more restaurant sales, more retail sales, and more automobile sales. And that is great for us. We're increasing our revenues by 9.4% here from 101 to 111 million. We are also increasing our program revenues. These are our grant revenues. Our secondary largest funding source is grants. Grants for all different sorts of projects that we have. It's a bit unusual this year that we have such a large increase. That's 21.23 million. In the past 2 years, Caltrans, which is our largest grantor source, has now allowed us to seek reimbursement for more than $20 million of expenditures. We've actually incurred these expenditures in the past fiscal years, but because of their cash management practices to manage their own cash flow, they've limited us to only seeking up to $20 million per year of reimbursement. We definitely have incurred more than $20 million on our projects, especially our Yuba Buena Island improvement projects. So you see that 28.8 million, and you see some other pieces of YBI multi-use path project. I'm really excited to see these grant reimbursements from the agency. Now, we also have decreases to our program revenues, which means that these projects either are on pause or they may be shifting their work to the next fiscal year. And you see that with the Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency project. That's our toll and affordability program. We have our Hillcrest Road widening project and our Ocean Avenue off-ramp reline. Very typical for us to have just some projects just not move as fast as we expected during the year. In terms of new fundings, again, very typical. We're always out there to look and seek for additional funding for our various projects. We have 3 new grants here that I will not read out each ones, but they're for more Yerba Buena Island West Side Bridge work, Brotherhood Way Active Transportation Corridor, and a project for decarbonizing downtown business delivery study.
E-cargo bikes.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Now, let's go to the other side. When you have revenues, you have expenditures. Expenditures is, again, very typical for the Transportation Authority. At this point in time, we are decreasing it by 19. Our largest source of expenditures is our Prop K, which will soon be our Prop L program. And these are expenditures that we are passing down to our various sponsors, MTA, Planning Department, SF Environment, TJPA, BARG, PCJBB, on, and a handful of our other smaller sponsors for our TFCA programs or Prop AA, so on and so on. But here we've listed some of the projects to highlight to you that are decreasing their expected expenditures, and they're not decreasing it just because of delays, but perhaps they're building other funding sources first before they come to the TA for their reimbursement. That's the light rail vehicle procurements, new flyer mid-line overhaul projects for our Prop AA. There's the El Taravel. We have more YDI projects for the Torpedo building on the island, 280 southbound Ocean Avenue, and again, another YDI island project, Hillcrest Road Line. Yes,
Just to clarify for new members benefit, these aren't cost savings or cost reductions. They're just not spending the money this fiscal year and it's going to push to next fiscal year.
And then we also have some increases to expenditures as well. And these are both related to our Yerba Buena Island Improvement Project. Construction for the right of way at Southgate, and then more design and construction West Side Bridge project. We also have new Prop K appropriations. Each of these have come before the CAC for approval. This is a handful. I see work for District 2, 4, and 5 here, in addition to other important pieces in the city. And then here's a chart that represents the expenditures we are decreasing. There are really 3 types of expenditures at the TA. Capital projects cost, as I mentioned, that's our main source of decrease. Again, blue represents our original budget, gray represents what we are proposing now. We have administrative operating costs that represents personnel costs in addition to non-personnel, which means audit costs, rent costs, copier costs, things that are not related to personnel. During this year, we did have some unforeseen costs that we weren't anticipating at the original budget. What that is a migration to a new accounting system. At that point, we were not aware that Microsoft was no longer going to provide customer service to us on a system called Microsoft Dynamics AX. Instead, they want us to move on to their next product, which is the Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform. So we have decided, based on the workload of the finance team, that we would be able to migrate the entire accounting system from one to another. That is a cost of about $500,000. And we will be also putting that in the cloud. Again, another item I'm very excited about. So in addition to that, we have also paused during the pandemic on purchasing some large equipment like servers and computers. We are coming to this point to purchase those items. As I can see, revenues are increasing. In the past 3 years, you may have not known that revenues were decreasing for the Transportation Authority, and we did a sharp cut on many of our expenses. And then in terms of our debt service costs, we are also decreasing that expense as well. Debt service is the amounts we pay for the one bond, sales tax revenue bond that the TA has, that we've issued in 2017. in addition to having to paying costs for a loan, the capacity to have $125 million loan to pay any sponsor reimbursements that may come before us. Now, since projects are decreasing by 19.1 million, or the main decrease is due to projects being pushed out or costs being referred to another year. There's no need to borrow as much money as anticipated in the beginning of the year. We had anticipated borrowing $75 million to pay our expenditures for fiscal year 22-23. We're only anticipating 20 million now. Therefore, we're decreasing the amount we anticipate to pay interest expense on borrowing that money. I know that was a lot, everyone, but this is the TA mid-year budget amendment in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions. Anna's here as well to answer any questions related to Prop K projects.
Great. Do we have any questions from members? If so, please raise your card. I think that's a good sign. Let's open it up to public comment. Great. Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment. And there is no remote public comment.
Great. Can we take a motion to approve this item?
I'll move it.
Great. Do we have a second? Great. Second, so motion by member Ho. And so can we take this by acclamation?
Yes, we can. Same call, the motion is approved.
Let's move on to item number 9, which is adopting a motion of support to approve the revised administrative code in the debt, equal benefits, investment, procurement, rules of order, sunshine, travel, conference, training, and business expense reimbursement policies. Again, presenting will be Cynthia Fong.
Thank you again for the introductions. Now this is quite a different item. There are no numbers in this item that I'll be going over, but this is a very routine, important item for the Transportation Authority. This is 8 policies that we're looking to update since there's been quite a bit of time since we've had a lot of update. These 8 policies have been reviewed by our legal counsel, our bond counsel, and also our financial advisors. They make recommendations to us, so we are able to conform with applicable law, provide additional clarity and flexibility for our processes. And in addition to reflecting administrative and organization changes, especially if we've had 3 years of the pandemic. There's quite a bit of paper here, everyone. It starts from page 103 on your packet to page 191. What we've done here to make it much more digestible for everyone is to create a matrix of every single change, big or small, and the reason why we're making the change. In addition to redlining the policy so you could see how we are changing. So we just see the strike throughs and additional language, just for the sake of transparency. There are many changes here. I would love to go through all of them if we had the time, but I think with having only 20 minutes, I can break it down to 6 major categories if you like, or I could go in detail. I was going to ask the chair, what would you like to do? The vice chair, would you like a summary?
I think the summary would be
of the
good.
changes of
Yes.
the 6 category of changes. So obviously with the ballot measure passing in November of last year of 2022, we've updated every reference from Prop K to Prop L. That was a nice, easy one. We've also increased, made a change to the executive director's authority to enter into contracts and purchase orders. She has the authority to enter into contracts up to 75,000. We are now recommending an increase of 100,000. This amount has not changed for over 15 years, while our rates for our consultants and prices of items have continued to increase every single year with inflation, the cost of living, especially in the repair. We're also striking that we will no longer, but we will now going forward in fiscal year 23-24 offer compensation to our CAC members. More details to come on that as we develop the budget next month and the month after that. We are also updating our meeting protocols to inform with the current state of emergency and to be prepared for in case anything like this were to happen again. Item change number 5 is updating our policies to match the San Francisco code to require contractors and subcontractors to provide us with equal pay reports if we were to ask as part of our equal pay policies. And the last change, we are also conforming to the San Francisco Admin Code and adding a term to prohibit the TA to conduct any business or to travel to any state that would have voter suppression laws. We currently do not work with any states that discriminate against LGBT and restrictive abortion laws as long as we can. That doesn't conflict with any of our grant funding that we've received here. With that, those are the major changes that are happening. If you'd like to go over them line by line, give me a call. And I'm happy to walk you through it.
Great. Do we have any questions from members? Member Ortega?
Yeah, I'm just curious, when you say that they're prohibiting travel, is it on person, is it a business travel?
Correct. It's only business travel, not personal travel.
Okay, I was just wanting to double check that because as transplant here, I have family in states that are doing this and we get into discussions and things, but it'd be very unfortunate, for instance, if that would be across the board. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from members?
I do.
Great. Member Bars?
Yeah, so just on that topic, I was under the impression that the city had recently changed its contracting guidelines such that some of the previous like contracting prohibitions, like traveling to Arizona, were lifted. Is this?
It's related to that, but it's still something I need to review and speak to our chair about. But there's a lot of discussion that's happening to change this as we're into, I think, year 3 or 4. And it does make it quite tougher for us to contract with this or to get good rates.
Yeah.
Good rates.
Right.
So that is something happening in the background. And as we have more information and that's confirmed and approved, we'll review our policies again. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that's happening concurrently right now.
Okay, so it's not, but it's not related to this. It's,
No.
Okay, with similar spirit, completely different effort.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, all right, thank you.
I guess I have a question on that as well then too. So I guess my understanding it was that it was tied to 12X, right? With the previous contracting, like would this policy be tied also to 12X or is it just going to essentially mirror?
It's mirror, it's a separate, we don't adopt every single piece of 12X because we have different types of funding. And also we have contracts that have begun previously to these terms while they're still active contracts right now. So we've mirrored it as best as we possibly can. That would make sense for our agency.
Great. Okay. Any other questions from members? Do we have public comment? Do we have remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment. There is no remote public comment.
Great. Can I get a motion?
Member Siegel.
Okay, Vice Chair Siegel makes a motion. Do we have a second? Member Chen, so can we take this by acclamation?
Yeah, Member Siegel with the motion, seconded by Member Chen. Same house, same call. The motion is approved.
Great, excited about that. Can we go to item number 10, which is the Bay Area Express Lanes update? And we'll be having Rachel Hyatt, Deputy Director for Planning for the SFCTA presenting.
Good evening, everyone, and to see so many of you for the first time in person. This is an information item, and this is the second of information items addressing sort of current regional topics, you know, things happening in the region. Last time was sort of the transit fiscal cliff and the regional transit network management effort. Today it's on the roadway side, or actually this presentation went to our board on the 21st, so the 21st of March, and looks at regional roadway management efforts, specifically the region's work on express lanes. And we had various guest presenters whose presentations are all available from the recording of the March 21st board meeting. If you're interested in the full, sort of the full content that the guest speakers were able to present, since I won't be able to answer questions or anything on their behalf, but I can also get folks in touch with them and in communication with them if there are like more detailed questions about the guest speaker's content. So express lanes are a form of roadway management using price, similar to what people may be familiar with a peak period electricity, pricing. So a way of sort of trying to manage the demand for the roadway space using price, managing demand for curb space using parking meters, a similar type of thought process behind it. Other types of use of price that we didn't go into discussion during this item are things like low emission zones, where highly polluting vehicles, pay a fee to go into a polluted area. And that idea is to, try to reduce the externalities, those negative impacts associated with the generation or use of a resource. So different reasons to consider this tool. Express lanes in particular are, they are recommended by the US DOT, US Department of Transportation, when there is an HOV lane or a lane, it generated, the use of them came from, wanting to optimize, make the best, most efficient use of high occupancy vehicle lanes. While high occupancy vehicles and transit go for free in these lanes, a single occupant vehicle, which otherwise wouldn't be able to use it, would pay a fee to use the lane. And then that fee is set at a level that keeps the number of single occupant vehicles low enough to make sure the speeds stay competitive. So speeds stay at 45 miles per hour. So it's still providing that priority for high occupancy vehicles and people in transit. So they exist alongside a general purpose lane. The other types of uses throughout, the San Francisco Bay Area that go free or for a discount in the express lanes today include clean air vehicles, or electric vehicles. So San Francisco, SFCTA specifically, we have studied express lanes and managed lanes before, but as you all are aware, there aren't any that exist in San Francisco. The most recent analysis work that we did and brought to the board was the 2018 Freeway Corridor Management Study that looked at, would San Francisco freeways achieve these goals shown here? So be more efficient in moving people and prioritizing high occupancy vehicle and transit travel, be able to provide more choice by reinvesting that revenue back into additional transit, as well as identify ways to expand the availability of transit to neighborhoods that don't have it. We went through in the board presentation a kind of a chronology of how the regional express lanes network has developed over the last 20 years. And the short story is the lanes have really started in the East Bay and the South Bay. And most recently, one of our presenters on that day was from the San Mateo Joint Powers Authority that just opened a new stretch of express lanes on 101 in San Mateo.
Rachel, do you want to share the map?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not sharing my screen.
Sorry.
I did not pull it up.
I did this exact same thing
Do you need help?
at the board meeting. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. How do I thought I had shared my screen. I am so sorry, everyone. That's so embarrassing.
Like, this all off the top of your head.
I was like, I really would love a map right now.
So I am so sorry.
So this is the slide deck in your packet. But you can go to
Yeah.
There's a few really helpful slides. This is one of them. Thank you, Elijah.
Thank you, Elijah.
See, I can't. Are you sure it's in the packet?
Oh,
or
I'm
in the
sorry. It's
supplement?
on
It
the
was on the
website.
link.
I
It was
feel
on
like
the,
it's
it was
on the
a supplement,
website.
yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
sorry.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Well, okay, so map would be very helpful in this situation. So the chronology, this is back in the 2000s when the Bay Area was using high occupancy vehicle lanes. And so the first express lanes started in the East Bay, Alameda and Santa Clara. The Regional Transportation Commission received authorization to expand into a network that would be, connected across multiple counties. In Santa Clara, in the South Bay, they have added express lanes on US 101 and 85, sort of headed up the West Bay coast, and San Mateo has connected to those and extended them up, towards the airport is the most recent starting place, the stopping or starting place of the lanes in San Mateo. This is looking ahead to the future about what's under study and what's sort of in design. That's in the yellow. In Alameda on 580 and in the North Bay on 37, which that'll be a bit of a different situation. It's not an express lane per se, because it won't be next to a general purpose lanes, but the purpose of that project is that whole structure needs to be replaced because of sea level rise. So clearly there's a lot of different agencies involved in implementing and operating these things. And so it's a challenge to make it a seamless experience for travelers going from one county to another. And that's where the region tries to coordinate the different operating agencies and make consistency between the different policies that guide, like what are the rates, what are the different benefits for different types of travelers who get discounts or exemptions, how is enforcement done, that sort of thing. So then we had the director of the Bay Area's express lanes system come and provide an overview of the regional express lane strategic plan. And what this plan has is the goals that the regional agencies are trying to achieve with express lanes. And then the definition of that network, which is included in the region's long-range plan. So that's what this network is. This is what's included in the regional plan, and you can see there the elements on 101 and 280 that were recommended in the 2018 freeway corridor management study that SFCTA led. And then she described some of the policy areas that are particularly active right now around equity, greenhouse gas emissions reductions to meet the state's requirements, required targets for reducing vehicle miles of travel in the state and the region, and then that issue about being consistent for travelers, even when there's different agencies involved. For equity, the region has advanced a number of pilots, and in fact, actual permanent changes in their fee and fine structure, in their policies around fast track, having a payment plan, was recently launched, for instance, to reduce the impacts of fast track fees and fines on people with low incomes. And then another guest speaker described the toll discount pilot that MTC, same organization, is launching next month in the East Bay. The vehicle miles traveled reduction, again, this is a part of the reason for the express lanes network is because the region needs to achieve these targets for reducing vehicle miles of travel and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with them. And this is one of the major strategies in Plan Bay area that helps achieve that required target. And then consistent operating policies, I think, speaks for itself. And I think a big one really will be the concept of equity benefits and discounts and exemptions, because now that San Mateo's approach uses one set of mechanisms for addressing equity and providing benefits to travelers with low incomes, and then now the region is piloting some an approach that has a different set of benefits. So we're going to need to figure out how to make this clear for people who are eligible for it, and and not sort of cause confusion for the people who are intended to benefit. And that's what this pilot is. This is what MTC calls their Express Lane Start pilot, and it's offering a discount to the toll rates on the express lanes in the East Bay on 880. And it's a pilot that they will launch this April. And it would be the first of the region's discounts on facilities like this. As you all know, the bridge doesn't have a discount of any kind other than for high occupancy vehicles, but it's not a means-based, an income-based discount. And so the discount that they're starting with as far as the pilot, and then they'll have an evaluation, is 50% off. And it's all of the same folks who are eligible for Clipper Start. So they're mirroring the eligibility and, in fact, the 50% off rate that is available for transit riders on the roadway side. The third speaker was someone from Caltrans, the state Department of Transportation, because it's from the state that we have these greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and the state in their climate action plan identified roadway pricing as a strategy that was going to be necessary to achieve those goals. And so from that climate action plan called for the state to convene a working group of private and public sector to identify how the state might go about implementing that recommendation. And Caltrans leads this working group that we do participate in. And there is going to be a report out, actually a joint hearing of the Air Resources Board and the California State Transportation Agency and the State Housing Agency, where various speakers will present on roadway pricing on April 6th. And I can provide more information on that for interested folks. So the main activity is the working group with, in response to this finding about the need for this tool on the state system. And then lastly, the San Mateo lanes, which just opened, they offer a equity, what they call their community benefits program. So these lanes, in case you haven't driven down 101 that far recently, are connect to ultimately to the Santa Clara and extend up to 380. They have some initial data. It only launched earlier this month, but they were able to provide some initial data about what the rates are. The benefit program is the beneficiary's choice of a Clipper card benefit or cash on a fast track toll tag. And this is one of the reasons that we need sort of the consistency conversation across the region, because their program is only eligible for residents of San Mateo County. So then closed with just a report out on SFCTA's efforts. The last step that we took had been the freeway corridor management study from 2018. which recommended a express lane solution that connected to the San Mateo lanes, but connected to downtown via 280. And would have the transit benefit and high occupancy vehicles benefit from the priority provided by those. And recommended going to the next step of project development, which we would need Caltrans, the state's approval, among other types of approvals, like environmental approvals for this type of a project. So it's a many years type of a process, which the board approved Prop K funding for us to start in 2020, but their direction was that we limit the alternatives to the high occupancy vehicle version of managed lanes and transit priority and not include the express lane alternative. So that's what we have done. So we are continuing our development of the 280 portion, the northbound portion, which would just be an HOV, high occupancy vehicle and transit priority lane for the exit of 280. And we actually expect to have a round of outreach coming up for that this spring. So you can, through Elijah or me, if you want to be signed up for notices about that if you're interested. But again, the request was that we just focus on the HOV and transit priority. And yeah, just to close with, we know congestion on the freeways continues to be a problem, just even after the pandemic. So we still see a need to look at these other ways of managing our scarce freeway space. Info item.
Do you want to share that the board conversation highlights?
Sure. Yeah, the board conversation, which again, maybe you watch the board meetings, but it is recorded if you want to take a look. The reactions were from a couple of the board members were, well, should we consider express lanes? And kind of asking, I guess, re-asking, do we want to look at all of the options and not just focus on HOV? So that was a question a couple of them asked, and then a couple of folks underscored the concern with equity and about impacts, the ability for low-income people to be able to benefit from the lane by being able to afford to pay into it, right? And also questions about how the freeways are used now by local traffic, and wondering what might happen, what might be the effects on sort of local traffic that is using the freeways to make local within San Francisco trips. If you would this be the right tool for San Francisco if that's a lot of what we see?
Great. Do we have any questions from members? I saw a couple of cards go up, so I'm going to go in the order that I saw them go up, which is going to be member Bars, member Ortega, and then Vice Chair Siegel.
Great, thanks, Charities. Thanks, Rachel. That's really interesting. I have a couple of actually really crude questions.
Sure.
So the first is there any research on the comparative benefits, either in terms of climate or freeway speeds, of HOV versus express lanes or managed lanes? Do we know if one's better than the other?
So the reason to use one or the other is really corridor specific, because if there is an HOV lane that has a lot of use, we've even seen this, and Santa Clara has seen this a lot, because of, particularly in their case, so many electric vehicles that are exempt or that were able to use the HOV lane, even though they might be a single occupant vehicle, the lanes would end up no longer providing a speed benefit because they were just too crowded. That's one of the reasons that Santa Clara sort of changed their approach to providing priority. In other cases, or other places in the country, and in the Southern California, there were situations where there wasn't enough transit using the HOV lane and not enough HOVs using the HOV lane. And so they just, they had extra roadway capacity that wasn't being well used. So that's a great question. I will have our team see if there's enough, there's not too much apples to oranges to be able to answer conclusively. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And okay, so then, I guess okay, then I don't know if I can ask you my second question, which is really like, what are the climate impacts of these kinds of managed lanes? Like, I'm not sure I'm following how there are greenhouse gas reduction benefits.
Yeah, what you want to be able to see is either shifts in trip mode or trip route choice or destination. I think time of day is not so relevant for greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, whether you make the trip at a different time of day. That is a congestion management and sort of peak management reason. But for greenhouse gas emission and vehicle miles traveled reduction, it's providing that priority to high occupancy vehicles and transit that makes those high occupancy modes time competitive and reliable enough that they're more attractive to people.
So you need to see the change of people going from single occupant vehicle to multi-occupant vehicle.
Correct.
Or to a transit vehicle.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right.
Including something like people are choosing to take Caltrain instead.
Sure. Okay, got it. Okay, okay. Got it. All right. Very interesting. I think that's. I had another question, but I think that's it.
Member Ortega?
Hey, so thank you for your presentation. Really appreciate seeing the slides that help. I understand technological difficulties. So I also have a crude question, which is, where does all of this toll money go?
Yeah.
Who gets this money?
Yeah, so there are required to be expenditure plans. So that's something that Caltrans and the State Transportation Agency require in approving one. There is state law that allows this kind of project to happen with state authority, and it requires that there be an expenditure plan for the revenues. But the common way that they're used is they're put back into the corridor for more transit, for the other types of travel demand management measures like information, like in San Mateo, they help, they put up communications to help let people know what parking was available at Caltrain parking lots. And into other community, this is especially true of in LA, their expenditure plan puts a lot back into the communities along the freeway. So they went through a sort of community benefit identification process with different communities, and that resulted in sort of not on the freeway improvements, but in the neighborhoods that were around.
Okay, that makes sense. And then if I'm allowed to ask just sort of one more question, I think I'm curious with the broader approach of greenhouse gases and the clear uptick in commuting, what other thoughts are had about the highway for the last mile problem in the Bay Area? A lot of people that I talk with, like, the reason they drive is because there isn't a good last mile step. So Caltrain, if you're not in one of the downtown centers, normally does not actually get you to where you need to go for the offices.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a side question. And I recognize that, but I would love to hear sort of as we talk about these other, like, try to reduce congestion traffics, last mile suggestions from the boards, because for instance, it's very hard for me to get to Caltrain from my house.
Yeah.
And so I would like to hear like alternate like ideas as we talk about like not only how to reduce the freeway congestion, but how do we reduce the actual number of cars that want to drive? And I think that's a last mile question.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, thank you.
Member Siegel, or Vice Chair Siegel, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Thank you, Rachel, for the presentation. My first question is pretty basic. So you mentioned the policy board decisions. Is the TA like the policy board in this case, or just one of policy boards that under whose purview the decisions that you listed under policy boards?
Yeah, let me go back to that slide. So these policy decisions, this is what you were talking about, right, Kat?
Right.
Yeah, so these policy decisions are applied to boards that have the authority to implement and operate managed lanes or express lanes or any kind of toll, if it's a bridge toll. The SFCTA board does not have that authority to do the managed lane project.
Okay.
To have the authority to do that requires state approval. Now, a lot of the other agencies, there are many other agencies in the Bay Area that do have the authority. As I mentioned, the San Mateo agency, the Santa Clara, the same type of agency that our SFCTA is, the same version of that in San Mateo and Alameda and Santa Clara, et cetera. They do, but it's because they have that authority to make these decisions, but it's because they've sought that authority from the state and been given it.
I see. So is there currently a local or regional body with authority over San Francisco freeways to set such policy, or not yet?
No.
But I went with that really great question you're channeling our executive director. MTC just created this subcommittee that all of the counties are represented on, because travelers travel everywhere. They don't care what the boundaries are. So we can weigh in, right, Rachel, on policy decisions, but there's a different committee for those who actually have express lanes on operations.
Yeah, it's advisory.
Exactly.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you. And then also, would an HOV or transit priority lane in San Francisco be required to allow electric vehicles? Is that a statewide requirement?
Yeah. Yep. You want it? Maria's chomping.
It is.
Oh,
No, we keep trying to support legislation to not have that word, but there's a very strong lobby for that. So yes, we would have to do it.
Yeah, and it makes the equity concerns, it just amplifies them.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Just a quick comment, knowing that the TA does not currently have authority to set such policies, I would just lodge a concern about the equity implications of express lanes generally, and be pretty wary of pursuing that, knowing how hard it is to reach people who qualify for discounts for things like, the muni fare programs, and I'm glad to hear that there currently seems to be more of a focus on the transit and HOV side of that.
And that equity program that Rachel highlighted that's starting is there in no small part because our SF rep on MTC, Commissioner Ronan, pushed hard for it. It's like our voice makes a difference.
That's great. Yeah.
Great. I just had a quick question then. So if the SFCTA doesn't have the authority to make these decisions, then is there an effort to, lobby for that at the state level to, change that to allow us to have that option?
Well, we would need the board's direction for us as staff to seek that. I think we would, and Anna and Maria are actually the public policy leads, the ones who are lead our advocacy about state legislation, but yeah, I think maybe you're a better person to answer it,
So I'd
actually.
say, so right now for SF Voice, on the sort of regional lanes under MTC's purview, so we have a way in now with our San Francisco rep. And what I heard from that meeting Rachel was summarizing is some number of our board members are interested in allowing us to study, not saying do it, but study express type lanes. So I think specifically we could figure out how they would work, what the equity and affordability programs would be that make sense. And you know, if they were to go forward, then at some point in that process, we would get the authority. So we don't know what form of governments it would take, but then we would get that authority over the SF.
Yeah, and if I hear like the I guess gist of your question or thought being that we don't want other boards to make these decisions that affect San Franciscans, we want to be able to make them, yeah.
Yes, so there's that component of it, and I definitely think I love local control, right? Because I think, you know, for the folks that live and work in the city, right, and that are even traveling to and from the city, right?
Yeah.
I guess the other question is in terms of enforceability of, you know, said program, particularly for low income residents that are not enrolled in the program, right? What would be, I mean, I would want to make sure that like if a person is cited for, you know, being in an express lane or an HOV lane when they're not supposed to be, right? But they would qualify for the program, what is the method to, in the event that they do get cited, right? That, you know, instead that they're linked to the low income program and they're not actually fined, right? But rather they're, you know, provided the resource to be eligible for the program on that. So hence why I think, you know, a little local control would be good in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And the coordination that the region tries to do, what on that front, what they've gotten the different agencies to agree to voluntarily is that the others will follow MTC's new policies around fees and fines, you know, which Commissioner Ronan, among other leadership, has reformed to make them better. But you know, strictly speaking, the other San Mateo, Santa Clara, Alameda, they don't have to adopt those reforms. They are going to, but.
Member Bars?
Yeah, I remember. On this slide. So actually very just simple. I see weekend tolling as both policy board decisions and Caltrans decisions. So I was curious why that is, and also why does Caltrans have decision authority over hours and days anyway?
Well, it's a state-owned facility, and Caltrans must execute an operating agreement with any agency that wants to make changes to this state-owned facility. And so this is in both columns because this has had different outcomes depending on which express lane was being negotiated for approval over the years, and has resulted in, you know, different distribution of roles and responsibilities for Caltrans versus that agency. They've been negotiating on these one at a time, over time, as you know, things are changing basis. Right now, Caltrans is working on a new policy for how the state will conduct their responsibility or their authority in executing these operating agreements, and they're updating sort of their guidance to local agencies about what they're looking for and what they, you know, what role they want to have, and so forth.
Great. Do we have any other questions from members? If not, do we have questions from the public or comments? Public comment.
Thank you. My opinion of these lanes, regardless of their HOV or whatever, they induce more traffic because it's easier to use it as opposed to being over in the other lanes, getting stuck in traffic. So if you have it, you have the money, you can, there's more traffic that's induced. And that's really supporting the culture of convenience that everybody wants. So the more you build these, the more you're going to create traffic flow in there. $3.7 billion by 2050. That's with a B, not an F. So I think that's a little outrageous to have that as a goal. Now, 2050 with inflation, well, maybe it will be the equivalent of what it is $1 million now. The Samtrans 7X bus has been discontinued for probably at least 15 years or more. The 398 bus that goes from Redwood City to San Francisco, that used to be 7 days a week, running pretty frequently, you know, from early in the morning, 6 to about 9 at night, is now down to 2 runs in the morning and 2 runs in the evening from both ends. And that's all that's going there for transit. A decade ago, reports were written for the regional express bus system. And that has faded away, never came back to life again. And I have been on that drumbeat. Where in the heck is that regional express bus system at? And ain't happening. But we go with this when I think we should put resources into a regional express bus system for that. And enforcement along the Santa Clara County corridor from Milpitas to Mountain View. VTA down there has to hire a highway patrol to go enforce it. They actually tell the highway patrol, here, we're going to pay you so much money. You have so many officers out there to control that corridor. So those are some of the problems that you have. But as far as I'm concerned, anytime you induce travel, which you're
Mr.
doing
Mason,
now,
so
because
time
you're
has
speeding
ceased.
it up,
So,
that's
yeah.
what you're going to get.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other remote public comment?
Two.
Sweet.
Yes. Yes, we have one remote public comment. All right, let's see, unmute here. Oh. Go ahead and unmute. Can you do that with dial star?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So this is Roland. So first of all, kudos on the setup, but for some reason now I can't see you anymore. I can see Daniela, which is a black screen. So first of all, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think it's fair to say that I personally introduced the concept of tolling discounts 4 years ago. I called it means-based tolling. And I did that at about the time as a Clipper Star was being introduced. Okay, the clock's gone now. And guess what? Now the system is going to be called Fast Track Start. The last comment I'd like to make is about local control. And I respectfully disagree. And I'm going to tell you why. Many of us are advocating for a seamless Bay Area, and that includes seamless tolling. So my recommendation is, rather than each county having different rules to do anything, is to work together at the MTC level and arrive at a regional consensus that works for the 9 Bay Area counties. Thank you.
Do we have any additional?
I'm done.
I do not believe so.
Great. Awesome. So this was an information item, so we're good to go. So I'm going to call on the next item, which is the introduction of new business. Do CAC members have any new business? Please raise your card if so. Great. So I see Member Levine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it seems like when the budget presentation was being done, that there was an item about the Yerba Buena road construction project, and that it was supposed to be completed. I thought I saw in summer of 2023, so just a couple of months from now. If I remember correctly, I guess before COVID, we had a couple of presentations here. I think it was before COVID, and we were promised when the project was completed that we would get a tour of
I remember that,
of the completed project, and I would love to keep that on the radar. It would be really nice to do that tour. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Levine. Member Daniels?
Yes, I would like to request an update or report from the Evans Street corridor.
Perfect, thank you. Member Davidson?
So this might have been discussed before, but I'm curious if this group has weighed in or is considering an electric bike rebate program. And if not, then I would like to request it for future consideration. Given we've seen cities all across the United States, Denver is the flagship role model city for this. Their program has been oversubscribed twice now. They've seen a dramatic reduction in vehicle miles traveled across their city. And it's been, I think the rebate is $450 up to $1,000 for an electric bike. And it depends on income level. But I would encourage this group, if this is the right body, to consider creating a program like that and funding a program like that.
And Maria, Anna, I think there is a test pilot program going on right now just on the electric bikes for food delivery, right? Right,
It's,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
micro.
Yeah.
It's micro, and this would be to open it up for for everyone.
We are already talking about this, so we're happy to talk to Rachel, bring something back.
Great. Member Ortega?
Yeah, I realized that there was something that I meant to follow up with Maria on. And it was, I discussed a long time ago about these larger transit hopes for the city. And like writing a bunch of that down and sort of expressing some of the concerns, which is not necessarily for this body, but I would still love to have like some time with the right person to have that discussion. And I realized I forgot to follow up, so I'm just gonna ask, can we set some time aside later and go ahead, because there was a specific reason I joined the body and I would still really like to hear it addressed at some point going forward. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Member Ortega. I'm gonna call on myself. So I would really like to see updates of the quick build program quarterly. So that way we can track pretty actively what's going on with the 50 miles remaining for the remainder of the high enduring network. The second thing is I would like to have an update, or not an update, I think exploring, what the options are for central freeway removal. I know I had brought this up a little bit past, but I think given that there's a lot of discussions that are going on in community that span 5 cultural districts and a variety of different constituencies that range from the Latino community to the Filipino community to the American Indian community, that what a cross-departmental study would look like, with I think frankly the SFCTA being the one to lead it through Prop K funds, but really looking at what it would look like to make sure that community is centered in leading that discussion on that process, on having the best outcomes for that moving forward. So I'd like to maybe see a presentation on that in the next couple of months, just given, what the opportunities are for options to kind of move that forward. In the event, because I think also we want to also study things like history of freeway removals in sensitive communities and those impacts that happen with that, And so seeing what happened historically, so that way we can move into planning for the future.
I think our executive director would be happy to come back.
Yes. When she's back from DC. Do we have any other items? Member Bars, is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would second several of those topics, the topic on the e-bike rebate and updates on what's going on at the city now, in looking at that. I think the central freeway removal update, I think I would second Chair Ortiz. And also in the request for quarterly updates on the quick build program. I would actually like to have somebody from SFPD come and give a presentation on their work to deter bicycle theft in the past and in the future.
SFPD.
The police department.
Oh, police department. Yeah, okay. So SFPD. Got it. Sorry, I only heard P. So on bike theft. Okay.
Indeed, I am aware that there used to be some past programs that have no longer been resourced, and I'm interested to understand how those decisions were made and if that could be changed in the future.
Great. Do we have any other introduction of new business for members? Last call for alcohol. Cool. Like we are gonna now have public comment on this item. Any public comment?
We've got one of those.
Great.
One public comment for remote. Go ahead and unmute yourself and okay, the timer will start now. Okay, Roland, go ahead. Can you unmute yourself? *6. Can you unmute yourself, Roland? *6 to unmute.
Yeah,
There you
thank
go.
you. It's
Perfect.
working now.
Okay, great. Okay.
You have to send me the unmute because I'm not allowed to do it on my own. So that was my public comment, but really I think it belongs here. What I'd like to do is to bring to your attention the latest development south of District 10, specifically the release of the Bayland Master Plan, which does not include any kind of integration between Caltrain, Muni Light Rail and buses, or the Geneva Extension BRT. The problem started 20 years ago when Caltrain delivered the CTX project, which eventually became the baby bullets between San Jose and San Francisco. The project included three
LeBrun?
sections. Yeah.
We're taking comment on new business that was introduced. This sounds more of a general.
It's up to you. My closing recommendation is that you itemize this at a future meeting, but I can wait for the next item if you like.
That'd be best. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Do we have any other further public comment? If so, let's move on to item 12, which is general public comment. Do we have any public?
General
Oh,
public comment?
general public comment. Sorry.
Topic is corporate commuter buses that we see here in the city authorized by the MTA. And if you examine that, those buses are basically running empty on Mondays and Fridays especially. And even on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they're still not at capacity. And I will prepare something for you to document that along with the violations that these buses have because they don't have the current permits issued by MTA. And the congestion that occurs because these buses arrive at a stop at the same time. You'll have 4 buses and you'll be receiving an email documenting with photos the congestion and the fact that Muni is then entangled in those remaining buses waiting to enter the white zone and Muni passengers having to board Muni in the street. So I'll be forwarding that to you. But the point is that we talk about the commuter buses saving all of this pollution and everything. And Champ determined that all those riders would drive. Well, my opinion is you have a lot of young people that they don't own cars or own their transportation. They rent their transportation through Uber and Lyft. And on the other hand, you have Caltrain only operating at about 35% capacity. So again, it gets back to the luxury of convenience. And if you have the money, you can pay for it, which the corporations are doing. And that, in my opinion, these buses are really a net generator of pollution now because they have such low ridership. And we need to find out what that ridership exactly is to justify it or deny it. As I see it, from my observations, it's just a tragedy to have, 20-some double-deck buses come
Thank you,
by
Mr. Mason.
at the intersection.
So
And, I
we're
will
cease public
stop
comment.
here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Roland had his hand up, right?
Yes.
So
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Roland.
Yeah, thank you. And this was perfect. I could see everybody, but now I can see you there, Daniela. Just now was perfect. Anyway, so what I want to do is to bring, and I wish Rachel was here because it's really for her and her team. But anyway, so I'd like to bring to your attention latest development south of District 10, which is the release of the Baylands Master Plan, which does not include any kind of integration between Caltrain, Unity Light Rail, and buses, or the Geneva Extension BRT. The problem started 20 years ago when Caltrain delivered the CTX project, which eventually became the baby bullets between San Jose and San Francisco. The project included 3 2-mile sections of passing tracks in Sunnyvale, Redwood Junction, and Bayshore. But Bayshore was never used for passing trains because the station was too close to the tunnel entrance. Fast forward 20 years, and we still do not have seamless integration between Muni and Caltrain, let alone the Geneva extension, which, as I said earlier, is part of the Baylands development. The solution is to shift the Bayshore station another half a mile further south into San Mateo County until it intersects with the Geneva extension, and then follow that by extending Muni Light Rail east over the Geneva extension. And at that point in time, the Caltrain overpass will naturally develop into a regional multimodal transportation hub. And I hope that what I said just makes sense. And I hope that you will agendize a presentation on the Baylands development with a particular focus on transit integration. Thank you and good night.
thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Do we have any other further public comment? Great. Seeing none, actually, based off of Mr. Mason's points, can I add 2 other items to introduction of new business really quickly? I think.
Cheers.
Yeah, I guess I am. Yeah. Particularly, I would like to know just in terms of what we look at when it comes to enforceability of commuter buses, right? And how we're tracking folks that are actually, riding these commuter buses, right? Particularly the Google buses. And then simultaneously, any historical data or previous studies that were done as a presentation on a express lane or express bus lane, particularly for across the region, so particularly multi-county.
Here.
Great. Do we have any other further public comment? Or introduction to new business, public comment, etc.
General public comment.
General public comment.
I can say our executive director says welcome. She is flying back from DC. She will be here next meeting.
Ooh, great. Awesome. Well,
We-
that being said.
Yes, we do.
Oh,
Sorry, I
more
thought
public
Roland had his hand up, but Roland, that was by accident or? Okay. I think that might have been an accident. Okay.
Okay, yeah, you commented. Cool. That being said, we're gonna move to item 13, which is adjournment.